Hey guys, Keaton here with TechSmartt, and today we're going to be comparing two of the hottest tablets out in the market. The iPad Air 2, which I've been using for the last few weeks, and the Nexus 9, which I've been using for just about a week right now. So, I gotta be honest, these are the two tablets I've had my eye on forever. I'm really curious about Android 5.0 Lollipop and just all the new features that it has, such as material design. And on the other side of the coin, I'm pretty interested in the iPad Air 2, and I've been using it daily. Just because I like Touch ID, I like how fast and zippy it is. So without further delay, let's go and compare these two beasts together to find out which is my favorite. So first here, let's go and talk about design, and starting with the iPad Air 2. On the front, there's a 9.7-inch display with a 1.2 megapixel FaceTime HD camera that looks pretty good, the home button which also acts as Touch ID. To the right of the device, we have our volume rocker, and at the bottom, we have our lightning charger and speaker. Now at the top, we have our sleep wake button and our 3.5mm headphone jack. Flipping the iPad Air 2 over to the back, we have our 8 megapixel iSight camera. And just in terms of design here, the iPad Air 2 has the same kind of curved edges that we did see on the iPad Air last year. It's also 6.1 millimeters thin, which is absolutely crazy because the last iPad Air was definitely thicker, and it comes in at just under a pound, and it just gives you a nice, pleasant experience when you're holding your stuff. Because after all, you want a tablet that feels good in the hands, and the design definitely does exceed that, but you want it not to be a freaking paperweight and it's just so heavy and everything. But luckily the iPad Air doesn't do this, and you literally just feel like you are holding air and your content is like air. Yes, I'm going to make a bad joke forever. Hopping over to the Nexus 9's design and starting with the front, we have an 8.9-inch display with a 1.6 megapixel front-facing camera and dual front-facing speakers, which absolutely rock because front-facing speakers are literally the bee's knees. So flipping it over to the right, we have a volume rocker and sleep wake button. To the bottom, we have our micro USB charging port. And at the top is a 3.5mm headphone jack. And flipping it over to the back, we have our 8 megapixel camera with LED flash. So the design of the Nexus 9 has kind of a soft touch, matte kind of feeling, and it also has a metal frame around it. And personally, I think the hardware is pretty nice on here. I wouldn't really compare it to anything the iPad has, as the iPad is full metal, but I mean, it's a nice alternative. Just the only kind of negative thing I don't really like about this is our hands as humans have oils on them. And if you might go to McDonald's and get greasy fingers and then touch this tablet, you're going to be painting that tablet a brand new picture with your oily hands. Regardless of if you went to McDonald's and have greasy hands, that's just the only thing I hate about soft touch matte designs. That's pretty much it, because fingerprints are going to get on there, and there's not really much you can do about it unless you get the white color, which will do a pretty good job at hiding them. But the Nexus 9 is 7.9 millimeters thick or thin, depending on how you look at things, and comes in at just under a pound. So in terms of hardware here, it's kind of pretty speculative, but if we're going based off build quality and materials, I'd say the iPad Air 2 is the far superior one, as it does a pretty good job at hiding fingerprints, as our hands are very oily just by our nature. And just overall, I really liked the design of the iPad Air 2. But on the other side of the coin here, I think the Nexus 9 is bringing some superior materials. HTC does a really good job at bringing a metal frame with kind of an interesting material, which is the soft touch matte. It's just not my cup of tea. Hopping over to specifications for the iPad Air 2, it features Apple's A8X processor, which is a triple-core 64-bit 1.5 gigahertz processor, alongside with the M8 Motion coprocessor, 2 GB of RAM, Touch ID, Wi-Fi 802.11b, G, N, and AC, alongside with iOS 8. Now flipping it over to the Nexus 9, we have the NVIDIA Tegra K1 processor. It's a dual-core 2.3 GHz processor along with Kepler DX1 graphics, 2 GB of RAM, Wi-Fi 802.11, A, B, G, N, and AC, and it also features Android 5.0 Lollipop. So when comparing specs of the Nexus 9 to the iPad Air 2, I'd say it's pretty much pound for pound. You're getting pretty much the exact same thing on both tablets. Just the only thing that changes it is on the iPad Air 2. You're getting Touch ID, and you won't find that on the Nexus 9. But obviously, one of the biggest differences here is the software experience that you're going to be getting on each. The Nexus 9 featuring Android Lollipop, and the iPad Air 2 featuring iOS 8. Moving over to the display and starting with the iPad Air 2, it features a 9.7-inch IPS display with a resolution of 2048 by 1536 and a pixels per inch count of 264. It's a fully laminated display, which means there's no gap between the display and glass, and I personally noticed this when I was using the iPad Air 2, and I've just really taken it into account over my use over the last few weeks. Also, there's an anti-reflective coating on the display, which means it's 56% more visible in direct sunlight. And yes, it was a little bit better, but it's nothing I'd go ahead and scream about. So the display looks great, and the fully laminated display is one of my favorite features. The best way to go ahead and notice this is pick up an iPad Air from last year and compare it to the iPad Air 2. It's definitely noticeable, and I just think it makes your content pop a lot more. But for the Nexus 9, it features an 8.9-inch IPS display with the same resolution as the iPad Air 2, coming in at 2048 by 1536 and 281 pixels per inch, alongside with Gorilla Glass 3. So the display was nice and bright, but oftentimes I felt like there was a little bit of haziness to the display, just making the colors seem a little bit faded out, and it was a really odd thing. And when in comparison to the iPad Air 2, there's not really a comparison, and I'd say just from a display standpoint, the iPad Air 2 is much more superior. Moving over to the software side of things and starting with the iPad Air 2, it features iOS 8, which really isn't anything new for these tablets. It has an updated user interface, which is always appreciated, and now that the iPad Air 2 supports Touch ID, obviously the operating system iOS 8 is going to support Touch ID too, so this means you can pay for applications just using your fingerprint. You can unlock your tablet, you can even use some of Apple's Pay's functionalities, but the only thing is if you own an iPhone 6 or an iDevice that does support Touch ID, your fingerprints won't be transferring over. Now, some of my favorite features on iOS 8 include continuity, which basically means if you're doing one thing on your iPad Air 2 and you want to transfer it over to a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, or anything along those lines, it's a very seamless transition. And it's just one of those things that I wish we would have had all along, but I've been using it daily. I like to type essays. I don't like to type essays, but when I have to type essays, it's just a nice, easy transition over to my MacBook Air because I like to write my essays on the couch, and I don't like using a computer on the couch, so it's just one of those nice perks. Hopping over to Android 5.0 Lollipop, it is 100% the more capable tablet operating system. It has multi-user support, it's better at multitasking, and just this Android tablet, the Nexus 9, really felt like a PC. And personally with Android 5.0, there's a much nicer design with material design, and the animations are just on point. And when I was at Google I/O this year, I was just blown away, and honestly, this is the first Android operating system that I have loved using day in, day out, and I wasn't able to say that before. It is beautiful. The features Google has added in there are on point. I love them, and I think this was a much needed operating system overhaul. So in comparison to the iPad Air 2 software, iOS 8, and the Nexus 9's Android 5.0 Lollipop, there's not many tablet applications that are supported for the Nexus 9, whereas iOS 8 has tons of applications supported for the iPad Air 2. So that's kind of either you really care about it and you'll go for it, or you don't and you'll go with the Nexus 9. For me, I love applications. That's why I love using my iPad Air 2. Just the selection is unbeatable, and I think a lot of consumers are going to lean that way. But with the Nexus 9, the productivity is there. There's a lot of cool features that just the iPad Air 2 and iOS 8 don't have, and I don't know when they're going to get, that the Nexus 9 has. And Android 5.0 Lollipop, I swear, is one of the best mobile operating systems I've ever used on a device, but more specifically, a tablet. Flipping both tablets over to the back and examining the camera, and starting with the iPad Air 2, we have an 8-megapixel f2.4 aperture lens on the rear. It's definitely sharper than the iPad Air 1 when you are comparing the photos, and you can actually do 1080p video with slow motion availability. Now on the front, there's a 1.2-megapixel FaceTime HD camera with 720p video capabilities. It's going to work fine for selfies and video chat, and if you definitely want to be a rascal, you can download Snapchat, the iPhone version, blow it up on the iPad, and take pictures on your iPad like that. But overall, I thought the camera was fine for both. Hopping over to the Nexus 9, we have an 8-megapixel camera on the rear with an f2.4 aperture, alongside with 1080p video. And the photos look pretty good, and they will definitely replace your point and shoot. But if I had to compare them, I would definitely choose the iPad Air 2 over the Nexus 9, as I just thought the photos on there were day and night much better. Flipping the Nexus 9 over to the front, it features a 1.6-megapixel front-facing camera, which isn't necessarily a good thing because it is a 1.6-megapixel front-facing camera. It also shoots 720p HD video, so I mean, it's okay, but I personally don't judge front-facing cameras because, let's be honest, it's just capturing your face. It is nowhere near the resolution of the rear-facing camera, which I judge a lot more. Hopping over to the battery life and starting with the iPad Air 2, we received around 8 hours of heavy use, which included watching Netflix heavily because I'm still catching up on The Walking Dead, at least the early seasons, and just watching some Arrested Development. And then when I was using the iPad Air 2 lightly, I was able to receive around 2 days worth of battery life, and that just included light web browsing and just sending some emails here and there. But hopping over to the Nexus 9 6700 milliamp hour battery, the battery life is pretty decent, and we received around 9 hours when we were using it heavily, which also included watching some Netflix. Again, I was watching The Walking Dead and Arrested Development on there, and also playing some games here and there. And then I received around a day to a little bit over a day when I was using the tablet moderately and just pretty lightly, which just included browsing the web a little bit and responding to some emails. So overall, I'd say the battery here is pretty much on par, and it just comes down to what you're using these tablets for. If you're going to be using it heavily, you have no problem, and I'd hope you would be returning to a charging station at some point in your day, and you can go and recharge these tablets up. But if you're using these tablets lightly, you're going to be all set for both options. Last but not least here is pricing in the model types. So the iPad Air 2 starts at $499 for the 16 gigabyte capacity and goes up by $100 increments to the next one, which is 64 gigabytes, and then thereafter that, the 128 gigabyte model. And it's available in 3 colors, which are space gray, white silver, and in gold. And then if you're feeling extra saucy and don't want to be restricted to just Wi-Fi, you can opt in for the cellular model, which is going to run you an extra $129 for which gigabyte capacity that you do choose. But for the Nexus 9, it starts at $399 for the 16 gigabyte model and $479 for the 32 gigabyte model, and is available in indigo black, lunar white, and in sand. And again, if you don't want to be just restricted to Wi-Fi, you can opt in for the LTE model, which is going to run you $599 for the 32 gigabyte indigo black model, and that's the only color available for the LTE model. So at the end of the day, both of these tablets are fantastic options, and they both feature their pros and cons. So with the iPad Air 2, it is fantastic for users that really want to consume pure media out there, and the number of apps available for the iPad Air 2 is uncomparable when comparing it to the Nexus 9. It's just absolutely crazy, and that's why I've personally chosen the iPad Air 2. But consequently, the Nexus 9 is perfect for productivity. Google has done wonders with Android 5.0 Lollipop, and I think a lot of you guys out there that are looking to purchase a tablet might view that option as the best one for you. But at the end of the day, both of these tablets are fantastic. Conversely, if you guys own an iPhone out there, then go ahead and check out the Nexus 9, as it'll just give you guys a good appreciation for what Google is doing with Android 5.0 Lollipop and some of the cool tweaks they've implemented, and vice versa. If you guys own an Android smartphone, then go ahead and check out the iPad Air 2, as it'll just give you a good appreciation for what Apple is doing in iOS 8. But at the end of the day, I, again, am a big fan of both of these tablets. Just the one big killer for me is the lack of applications optimized for the Nexus 9. It's going to kill a lot of their market share, and it's kind of sad because I really did enjoy the Nexus 9. But for most people out there, this one's going to take the cake, and that's most definitely the iPad Air 2. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. So the iPad Air 2 is going to remain in my backpack and be the tablet that I use every day at school for its ease of use and the number of applications that are available for it. So if you guys enjoyed this comparison and enjoyed seeing both the Nexus 9 and iPad Air 2 go head to head and just like what each manufacturer is doing with both of their tablets, then go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up, as it really helps the channel out a bunch and just lets me know that you guys are interested in what new tablets are being released. Also, while you're at it, drop me a comment down below letting me know which tablet you guys would go ahead and pick up. Do you like what Google is doing with the Nexus 9? Do you like some of the software implementations on there? Or do you like what Apple is doing with their iPad Air 2, iOS 8, etc.? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll be sticking around for a few hours after this video is uploaded to go and chat and interact with you guys just about these tablets, as they are pretty cool, and tablets are getting smarter and smarter every day. And finally, go and subscribe to the channel to be notified when a brand new video does come out, because guys, we have a lot more coming, and 2014 is not over. We have some cool other stuff in store, and we do have a Nexus 6 in-house, so go ahead and subscribe. It lets you know when a brand new video comes out. One click, you're done, and you'll be able to see all our videos from here on out. Thank you guys once again, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.